Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen. What's shaking? Anything new?
Well, you know that book that I thought I'd never finish? I finished it. I have another writer friend who says I just tortoise along, that I just anguish about things and then eventually it's done. So I guess that's what I did. So I finished. It's called The House Sitter. And I had a couple nights of actual nightmares. I mean, literal bad dreams where I woke up during the night and thought, I can't publish this. This is just, it's whatever, fill in the blank, every negative adjective you can think of. And so I sent it off to two trusted early readers who assured me that although it wasn't perfect, they had some suggestions that they thought it wasn't completely deplorable and horrible and that they enjoyed it and thought it was a good story. And I was a little needy too. When people first read your books and you're like, okay, you said you loved it.
What exactly do you love? Yeah. Could you flesh that out? So how does it compare genre-wise to The Moonlight Child?
Well, The Moonlight Child...
the Amazon #1 hit.
It's not number one anymore, but it was for quite a while.
A long time.
It is also domestic suspense, but there were a few readers that were like, although they loved it, they would have liked a few twists and turns. When I wrote this book, I deliberately had a few misdirects, you might say. And that was the part that I panicked about. I thought, am I in over my head? Am I capable of doing this? Did I do it in such a way? You don't want readers to feel like you were trying to deliberately fool them or pull a fast one. But you want them to be along for the ride. And so there's kind of a fine line between giving enough information and leaving some back. And I went through the manuscript a couple times to make sure that I hopefully pulled it off.
I'm sure you did. I can't wait to read it. I love the premise. I mean, even the title alone tells me exactly what I'm getting myself into.
Well, when my son asked what it was about, he knew the title was The House Sitter. I said, she's a house sitter, but she's not supposed to be there. And he would walk around the house going, but why wasn't she supposed to be there? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it too much, because sometimes I find that if I discuss things too much and they're not written yet, that it kind of plays itself out. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, that's all I can tell you right now.
Yeah, it's like the magic. You lose the magic a little bit. Or you just, when you describe it to somebody, you think, oh my gosh, that sounds really stupid. Like,
really lame.
Write a book about that. Yeah.
Yes. You're like, who's going to buy that premise? Or if they make a guess, oh, I know, does she such and such? And you're like, no. And then you start to think, well, maybe their idea is better, or maybe
exactly.
You could just jeopardize yourself so many ways.
For sure. Yes. Well, we had a very insightful guest on this episode, Kelly Harms. She really had amazing advice for novice writers, or even seasoned writers for that matter. Did you agree?
Oh, I agree. And there was a lot of Tess and I nodding our heads as she was talking, which she picked up on at one point.
Yeah.
So she was a lot of fun to talk to. She's had a really great, unique background because she's been a literary agent and she's worked in a publishing house and she's an author. So she's been on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, and she had interesting insights about the industry and just from the perspective of all of those hats. So it was really, really good. I think our listeners will enjoy it.
Today, we're excited to have Kelly Harms with us. Kelly is a USA Today, Amazon Charts, and Washington Post best-selling author and has received starred reviews from Booklist, Library Journal, and Kirkus, which is no small thing, believe me. She began her career in publishing in New York, where she worked as an assistant editor and then literary agent, and was able to learn her craft from the most passionate authors and publishing professionals in the business. The 7-Day Switch is her 5th novel. She now lives in Madison, Wisconsin with her son, Griffin, husband, Christopher, and Scout the dog. She enjoys life near the water, traveling, sailing, baseball, and good books. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
I live about 45 minutes away from Madison, so we're
I
actually
know.
kind of close. If you ever want an old lady friend, I'm available. So
That's all I want in the world, but I'm not sure you qualify, Karen.
this interview is off to a really good start.
Well, I was almost late to the interview because I made the mistake of opening one of your books, Kelly, and I started reading and I lost track of time.
Oh, good. That's the goal. When I envision my reader, it's a woman who's busy, and she's probably a chauffeur to many small children. And so I imagine someone who's in the car for 10 minutes, and I have to get her into my world as fast as possible so that she can get the most out of my book without having to feel like it's work.
So with that in mind, would you mind telling us how you became a novelist and which one of your books was your first published work?
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to say that. And I'm so grateful to be on. By the way, I want to make sure you guys know I am always just happy to talk about books for hours, and anyone who indulges me in that is the best. So I began in the business on the publishing side. And when I was married, newlywed, and we wanted to start our family, it was also at a time in my family's life, my extended family, where I wanted to be closer to home. Not just because I wanted my future baby to grow up in sort of that Midwestern idol that I had, but also because we were dealing with an illness in the family and we wanted to be all together. So living in New York City, not being able to envision exactly how to parent there after being raised in a big rural area and coming from a bunch of farming stock, we decided to move back, start our family in the Midwest. And I was freelancing and making it work. It was before we all worked from home. So leaving New York was kind of unheard of at the time if you wanted to work in the publishing industry. But I had always had stories inside. And I thought, okay, this is my big opportunity to get one on paper. And so I wrote it while I was expecting. And it was called The Good Luck Girls of Shipwreck Lane. And the book was really about finding, while it has overarching Kelly themes that you'll see from book to book to book, and I just can't seem to escape them, this book was about finding and making a home and a family. And so I can really see why I wrote it at that moment in my life. Even though there's no kids in it, there's no momming, it's really a very fun rom-com. It's got a very central core of where do we belong and how do we create the world around us. Plus, it's got a lot of cooking in it. You cannot get through it without gaining, at least writing it and gestating at the same time was quite a combination.
That's awesome. Well, you have such a unique background with having been an editor, literary agent, and now a novelist. How did working in publishing affect your career writing fiction?
It's a double-edged sword. It's wonderful to know how the machine works, to know, okay, how long is this time going to be? What should I expect out of this contract? What am I looking for in my goals and where am I going? The other side of this is knowing how the sausage is made and knowing too much and having a bunch of boundaries and rules around what it has to be a certain way. Because publishing, while it's amazing and full of really brilliant people, is not known for flexibility. It is one of the more rigid places that I've brushed up against, simply because there's a lot of that we all bring so much history in with us, with our reading history, essentially. Like if we think about our lives, we have a lived history and then we also have a history of read experiences and how we interacted with that book. So instead of using market research or studying what else is going on in the zeitgeist or how we're interacting with our devices or our tech or the world around us, publishing is all about what it felt like when I read a book, very subjective. And so as I think about my work, And I'm always pretty tuned into myself when I'm writing. I'm writing for myself. I'm thinking about myself as the reader. And then in publishing, it's very much like every editor brings his or her own life experiences to the story. And so you have to choose from the editorial advice that's dead on and brilliant and perfect, the editorial advice that's mired in the hard day they had that day, in the reviews that are starred and you're a genius, and the reviews that have actually noticed that you might have a couple of flaws, and those ups and downs. And you know a lot about how that all works when you've been in the industry.
Now, I have a question that I've been wondering for years, and you are one of the few people that can answer it. Um,
Oh,
in the beginning, when ebooks first came on the scene, and I believe you worked in publishing at that time,
yes.
and for me, it was Kindle, and for writers like me, we saw that as an opportunity. But I know publishing eventually came to see it, traditional publishing came to see it as a disruption in the way they'd always done business. When it first came on the scene, were they worried about it, or did they just think it was a passing phase?
I think that I can only really speak for what it was like inside the assistance pool at that time, because we were all living in New York. We were early adopters of our iPods. So now you know exactly when that was.
Um,
And so I was consuming music in a new way than I had as a young person. And so I knew that there was something big was brewing here. And I remember saying that our publisher needed a website in a meeting and having the room just get very quiet. So the fact that I was reading some for fun on my computer, it was very, very little bits of things that were available. Now, I left the industry from the publishing. I published my first book in 2013. And even then, there was that moment where you say, oh my gosh, I could self-publish this. And I know what the numbers will be like compared to what they're offering in New York for royalties, the back end, we say in the business, right? The front end is for listeners, we get an advance on our future earnings. And in some cases, that advance never proved to come all the way through, and our earnings don't meet up to the level of the advance. And then in other cases, we earn so much far and above the advance that the advance probably was too low. So with self-published authors, they instead invest in their own careers, and no one pays them in the beginning, but then they get to keep a larger percentage at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing how all of that worked, my major concern, we all feel two things. One is, will the gatekeepers like me? Am I worthy of a book contract, right? We all feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, you're going to be hard pressed to find anyone who's self-published who didn't have a moment where they thought, do I need approval from the outside? Thankfully, many, many people have gotten over that and pushed on anyway. But I was certainly guilty of saying, okay, would the same person in my shoes who did my job last year want my book this year? You know what I mean? And then at the same time, I also had seen that when a relationship goes well with a publisher, magic can truly happen. So I was definitely of the mindset to get an agent and go through the traditional channels. At the same time, I entirely expected to get a low advance and to need to feed my family in another way. And so on the fly, I was writing and writing and writing, thinking in the back of my mind, one of these days I'll need to figure out this self-publishing thing. You know what they say, tell God your plans, he laughs, right?
Yes.
And so all those starts of novels didn't prove to be anything. And that's partly because when I wrote the book that I wanted to send to the agent, I was writing just for myself. And when I wrote those novels, it was in a time where everyone, and I think I still hear this sometimes, in self-publishing, you're told that if you're genre, you can find your niche and your market right away. And you just need to dump a lot of books into the marketplace and try to find your people. So I was looking at it through those lenses, and I don't know, it wasn't like the best representation of who I wanted to be as a writer. That said, when my son was about 2 weeks old, I mean, I was in the emergency room getting triaged in labor when my agent called and said that the book was going to go to auction. So
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I remember saying something like, I don't care. Something not entirely helpful. And then 2 weeks later, she called with the final details of the contract. And I remember telling her, hurry up, I've got my shirt off and there's a hungry baby waiting. So I didn't really have my focus on my career in that particular moment, but you'll have so many listeners who laugh. I really thought I was going to have tons of free time during maternity leave to work on my next book and to crack the whole self-publishing thing and figure it all out. Nope, I got the contract from St. Martin's. It was from Tom Dunn, an imprint that has since shuttered, but was just a fabulous enclave of story. And I was just so overjoyed that I forgot everything else and focused on the excitement that was happening in my life at the moment.
Now, your current publisher, Lake Union Publishing, has more of a emphasis on digital marketing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're selling, all the Kindle books, and they've done a really great job promoting you as an author. Have you noticed a difference in your readership?
Incredible difference. So I celebrate and love being able to access people in two different ways now that I'm at a publisher that's a little bit more digital forward. One is that I meet readers who are reading at a lower price point. So my first two books were released in hardcover, and they were respectively $24 and $27. I think about that as being enough, especially 8 years ago. I felt like that was an investment. For me, even, I don't remember thinking that I could just go out and buy hardcovers whenever I felt like it. The book had to be good. It had to live up to the investment. I couldn't take risks on new authors.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still get my books in hardcover. And that is because so many of my readers met me that way, because I just think that personally, as long as I'm going to have an option and they ask my opinion, I'm going to ask for hardcover, because when I'm in the library and I get a hardcover and it's in such good condition and the print is better and the quality is there, I just soak it in. And if your listeners could see me, there's just a stack this high and they're all hardcovers off the new in fiction shelf, because now this is my job. I can just make it rain hardcovers. But that said, the $4.99 price point that Lake Union is able to offer me at, because they do volume instead of per book, is just it's just such an open door. For me, when I'm down at that $1.99 discount that happens every now and then, I will go on a shopping spree. I will buy anything for $1.99 and try it. And if I'm 3 chapters in and it's not for me, that's cool. That's cool. But if I fall in love with a new author that way, the next stop is just getting every other book ever from that person and just binging and losing myself into like a little story bubble. And so I appreciate that I can give that to people now. That said, I feel sometimes the stress of my friends who are independent booksellers, who feel in direct competition with those digital purchases. And my independent booksellers, especially here in Madison, but all over, that have championed me, I owe them such a debt of gratitude. I wish there were a way to be available to both kinds of readers, and I do see that going forward. But in this moment, there is sometimes a little bit of strain between the digital purchaser and the person who goes into the store and has the relationship and asks, what can I read that's like this? And the time that I see that most expressed in my readers is when they write me and say, what are your real likes? And I think I'm happy to share that with them. And when I say read alike, I just mean, if you like Kelly Harms, what else would you like to read? And I think, my gosh, that's the whole point of when I was a kid and I would go into B. Dalton and say, clutching The Hobbit and saying, what else do you have for me? And that's where that interaction in an independent bookstore is just, it's priceless. So that's what I want people to feel able to do with my stories.
Your newest title, 7-Day Switch, is somewhat different from your other books. Can you define the genre magical realism and tell us about the story?
I am not worthy of the title of magical realism. I
read the book. Trust me, you are.
Oh,
I loved it.
this book is a body swap book. So it's about as much magical realism as Freaky Friday is magical realism. If like Water for Chocolate is also magical realism, right? They're both delicious movies. Don't get me wrong, but I am no Isabel Allende. There are magical realism books out there where the entire world is the one we know with a tiny flip. And I am a total junkie for those books. It's an honor to be included among them. And I think we're all thinking of Murmur of Bees or 100 Years of Solitude or Sarah Addison Allen. I mean, there's lists and lists of authors who are in that space and do it so beautifully. At its core, 7 Day Switch is a comedy. It's a rollicking comedy that, if you look too closely, you might notice that I am asking women to think a little bit about what's going on in their life. I am challenging some of the ways that we interact in our friendships, our female friendships. And I'm challenging the way that we talk to ourselves. In this book, more than any of my other books, I really wanted to take on that steady drumbeat of cruelty that comes from that critic inside us every time that we have to face out towards the world. And when you're a mother, your kid is that out-facing window into the world. And so I have these two mothers who think that the other person is doing everything completely wrong. But of course, that feeling comes from a sense of insecurity that if we're not doing well enough, that we're going to get caught out, that we're going to feel shame, that we're not the mothers that we wanted to be. And so when those two women with those levels of insecurity about the choices they've made in their own lives swap bodies and find out what life is like for the other person. And I don't mean in that, although I do have a lot of fun with it, like, forgetting the kids' names and having hijinks and all those things. I mean, there are definitely, Karen, I've given people a few moments to just laugh so hard, hopefully.
I laughed out loud.
Oh, good.
Yes, you did.
But then at the same time, I think that I looked a little deeper into the actual lives of working women and stay-at-home mothers, just from talking to my friends and getting really clear on not just what the challenges are on the surface, like we're too busy or we are mentally disengaged or we wonder, but also on those lower levels of, are we good enough? Is this enough for my life? Have I chosen the right path? So once those women switch places, they really get an inside view on what the other person is going through. And they change so much as people. And I really had fun writing it because I felt like I changed too during the writing.
I found it funny. Like I said, I laughed out loud a few times, but I also found it really touching. And I'm going to give you a compliment. I hope you take it as a compliment. I found it to be an easy read, which does not mean it wasn't a great book. It was a great book, but I was going through a period where I'd pick up book after book after book, and I just couldn't get into them. It was me. I was very preoccupied. There were things going on. And then I started your book, and I sank right into it. And it was so nice to know I hadn't lost my reading ability. So I want to thank you. I thought it was great.
Oh, thank you. So I will tell you, Karen, what is above my keyboard on a Post-it note, because there are days where I just don't want to write. I think we all feel that way. Even though we have dream jobs, there are days when it's just a job. And so I have a little sticky note that says, keep going. This book might be somebody's slump buster. Because I personally, last year, I had such trouble getting into story. I had to get it from other sources. I found myself watching movies, listening to audiobooks. But when it was time for me to focus on reading, the news was in my mind, and the soundtrack of the world just wouldn't die down low enough.
Yes.
Plus, most of us were either alone too much or never alone. Some combination.
Tess was never alone.
Yeah, and I had a lot of togetherness time too, and then at the same time, like I could just imagine what it would be like to be on the other side where you don't have the option, you don't get the hugs. Being smothered is a luxury, I always say, even though we all need breaks from that too. So I was just stuck. I couldn't get into a book in that engrossed way. And then when 7-Day Switch came out, so many people shared with me, oh, this is my slump buster. And
Slump buster, I love that.
Yeah.
I've really taken a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, you manifested that sticky note.
I guess I just know what it's like to look through seas and seas of novels, to have precious time and money, and then to try to get your hands on the book that's going to sweep you away. And it's magical when it happens. It's just magical.
Now, if someone is unfamiliar with your books, which one would you suggest they start with?
Oh, a lot of people come in, if you're a mom, a lot of people enjoyed the Overdue Life of Amy Byler. And that one, I think it's on sale right now too. So go check that one out. No, low barrier to entry. Amy Byler is a woman whose husband did a runner on her while she still has two school-age kids at home. And she has been trying to do it all, keep things together, and make it look like everything is okay. But Amy is a children's reference librarian. She specializes in young adult literature. And so she sees the world through this prism of the books that we all know and love from our own childhoods, as well as the books that our kids are reading or that we've seen turned into movies and so on. So I had a really great time writing that one. There's a moment where she gets sprung basically from her everyday life and gets an opportunity to go to a librarian's conference while someone else cares for her kids. And without giving away too many spoilers, her passion for reading and educating young readers spins into a wonderful and wild adventure full of love and drama. And yeah, you have to read it to find out. It was one of my favorite books to write because I had the most time with it, and also because I am a single mother myself, and until very recently. So I was really able to put a lot of myself into it. And boy, am I ever a young adult reader like crazy.
Your bio mentions you're a dreamer. Can you share how that aspect of your personality feeds your creativity?
Well, I think that the dreamer aspect of me lets me play pretend a lot. And I do a little tiny bit of plotting, but I have a little writing group. To give you an example, I have a small group of writers I meet up with in the mornings to get some pages written every day. And if I ever forget to turn mute off, they hear me saying the characters' lines out loud while I'm writing in voices. So I am having a little play going on in my head while I'm writing. And it's not a lot of, it feels more like dictation. My imagination, or I like to think the characters are up there somewhere and they're all doing what they want to do. And I'm writing it down. And every now and then I'll just say something, you can't say that. And so then I get reminded to go back on mute. So that part of me, that imagination, that dreamer, I think I had a childhood that just really leaned into it. A lot of alone time, a lot of outdoors time, a lot of wandering around being bored that kind of led to this world inside. But at the same time, you have to have a dreamer's heart to be in the publishing industry. All of us who are writers have a core of us that said, like, it has to happen to somebody, so why shouldn't it be me?
Mm-hmm.
And even like that voice, like I try to drown it out sometimes. I think we all do. I think the world does. Something in us says, maybe this is my turn. Let's give it a try. And the other part of you is like, hush, you're not this, you're not that. It's not right for this. It's not right for that. It'll happen when. And so the dreamer part of me, I just try to nourish it as much as I can, because publishing can be a kind of a brutal business at times. And so I let that part of me have the reins as much as I can.
So you gave us a little bit of insight into your writing process. What does a typical day look like for you, writing day?
I do, all my other books have been written solo, but since the quarantine started, I needed like an extra bit of hand holding. I think we all did. And so when it was kind of safe to go out in the world again, I rented a small windowless office and I get my huge computer screen up and I get a small cast of friends and it certain time each day. We meet up, we write as much as we can, as fast as we can, and then we check in and say, like, everybody's still alive? Is anybody stuck? And then we go again, and we do that as long as somebody can keep going. So that's been working. I'm so grateful because I'm not the one who keeps us in line. If it was up to me, I would pour myself a cup of coffee and it would be chat time. But yeah, I have friends who keep me in line, and it's been amazing. I really, really recommend it. I found my way into it through the Women's Fiction Writers Association. And then from there, it just built on itself.
They call those writing sprints usually.
Yes, except to be honest, I only write in what you would call sprints. I don't spend 6 hours at the keyboard each day. I write for about 3 hours, and then I lie down and stare at the ceiling for a long period of time.
I love the honesty.
I mean, the book's getting written, funny. So I guess I'll do it that way. But it's always been something that I could probably do twice as fast, but I'd be twice as unhappy.
Yeah. And once you find your rhythm in your own process, it's best to stick with it. I have learned that the hard way, thinking, I should be more of a plotter, or I should do this or that. So what are the
plot is so this peer pressure to plot. It's real, and I'm
with colored sticky notes.
Oh my gosh, when I see other people's situations on Instagram, I'm like, how did they do that? Get me like a big piece of whiteboard, and I'm going to plot my book, and I'll never be stuck in the middle ever again, and I'll never have to do revisions. Nope. Sorry, friends. Nope. We're all in it together.
So what parts of writing fiction are the easiest for you, and what are the hardest?
Well, I already said the dialogue is kind of happening without me. If my brain worked in plays, I'd probably have a lot easier time of it, because when I do have to do a block of description, I am like, it will take me 3-4 times as long to actually remember what something looks like. And one of my weaknesses is that I can write an entire book without ever describing anything about the main character's appearance. So luckily, I have editors who take me back into the book and say, okay, can you describe what she looks like? And I always think to myself, are you kidding? It's obvious what she looks like. So I think I've put it in there, but I just haven't. That's my talent. I also have trouble in the muddy middle. For listeners who are in their middles right now, I would like to say you are not alone. It's always hard. The blush of the first love affair with your idea is gone. The genre conventions that might help if I were writing mystery, I can't put another dead body in there just to keep things flowing. So I do find I have to dig a little deeper in there to keep the momentum going.
So what writing advice can you offer to those starting out? You already did a little bit, but do you have something else to offer?
The thing I say, and there is no better advice than this, I'm afraid, is that you need to go and read, and you need to read widely, and you need to read outside your experience. It's not enough to read in genre. It's not enough to read just your favorite author over and over again. The reason that I think that is because my whole job for 10 years before selling my first book was reading other people's work. And that gave me the leg up. If I think about the one thing, the huge advantage that came from being in publishing, the biggest one is just reading other people's work and starting to go from I understand the mechanics to I speak the language. It's sort of when you start dreaming in plot and dreaming in story, then that's when you're in the right track of how much you should be reading. Further, I think that we all hope someone is going to wake up one day and give us permission. And I would like to say, and you guys both know this, from the other side, that day is never coming where the permission feels legitimate. Even when you're under contract, even when you're under deadline, even when you're writing the follow-up to a huge bestseller, or you are given permission to write whatever the heck you want or whatever, there is no time where you will internalize that you are worthy to write the book. That will only ever come from inside you out. It cannot come from the outside in.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever story you're telling yourself about the day you get the agent, or the day you get the contract, or the day the book comes out, nothing can compare to the work you do on the inside to boost yourself when the going gets rough. You guys are nodding.
We're nodding.
There's a lot of
With
nodding
we-
happening.
Yes, we agree. Yes, yes. And it's so hard to find that we are very in touch with our inner critic, but our inner cheerleader seems to be very, very difficult to locate.
That's because we want to protect ourselves from disappointment. We don't even want to view ourselves as optimistic fools. My internal editor is not nice. There are words for her. But she is trying to protect me from a bad review or from a bad experience out there or for something that, I've been through personally or from rejection or from all these other things. She's there for a good reason. She's just not useful when you're trying to write a book. And when you take her away, all that's left is your cheerleader. All that's left is the action. And the action that you take when you write is your inner self saying, this is worth it. This can happen. I deserve this.
I deserve this.
I know I get really woo-woo. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it.
What writing book would you recommend for aspiring authors?
I don't recommend a ton of intricate craft books, although I think I've read the same ones that everybody else has. But I really rely on the mindset work that it takes to sit down. And then we all know what our own strengths and weaknesses are. So I read a lot of books about the assemblage of the story, especially when it comes to that murky middle, for example. I study a lot about words, and I think one of my favorite craft books in the world is just called The Writer's Thesaurus, which is this monster that I read like a novel, page, A, and it's just 1,000 different words for things that we get into our language ruts when we start putting a lot of words on the page. And so that keeps me fresh and interesting, hopefully. Although I still have a problem with the word weird. I've already done a find and replace on weird like 10 times in my next novel. So we'll see about that. Anyway, so I cling to the ones that are on my desk are, of course, On Writing by Stephen King, Bird by Bird, and then The Writer's Thesaurus are the ones that I refer to over and over again to get into the headspace. In terms of craft, I think Save the Cat is useful. I think Story Genius is useful. What's Libby Hawker's book?
Take off your pants. Take off your pants. That's a great title.
I find that one useful too. There's loads of good craft books out there. I thought, I like The Teachings of Don Moss. If you're looking for how to know if your book is the concept that will work in the marketplace. That said, there's no craft book that will teach you what you can learn from just reading 100 novels in the next year. 200. You can't read too many.
Yeah, and writing a lot too. I think just finding, that 10,000 hours, that's a real thing. And it takes a long time to find your voice. So I think, reading and also writing, even if it's the novel that is only in the drawer forever, it's worth trying.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but if I read enough, then I can't not write. There'll be something I read and it'll either be so good I'm inspired, or it'll be such a stinker that I'm like, okay, I'm coming in. I'm going to come. It's almost as though, you watch somebody sweep the floor wrong and then you decide, okay, I'm coming in to resweep. So that is not to say that, but we all know there are duds out there. They happen.
Do you have an ideal reader in mind when you're writing?
I'm writing for whatever stage of life I'm wrestling with at the moment, or whatever theme of life. So when I said Shipwreck Lane, which is a book about winning a free sweepstakes house from HGTV, that's in its essence really about finding home and creating home any way that it comes to you. And when I wrote Bright Side of Going Dark, which was a pandemic orphan, but that book was about learning to live with my tech. And it came out of the fact that as my books sell more and more copies, more and more people are interacting with me, and it becomes a new second job, a fun job that I thought was the whole point sometimes. And nope, the whole point is still the writing, the everyday writing. And that's what I love, and that's what I want to be doing all the time when not staring at the ceiling.
Right. Does your family read your books?
Yes and no. My son Griffin is 10, and he feels that the book should have way more dragons in them. But he did help me a lot with the young characters in 7-Day Switch who are named Henry and Samuel. So he really helped me differentiate those two characters and make them hopefully come to life on the page. And so he's a help for me a lot. And then Chris is not what you would call a women's fiction reader, by and large. And I'm a little scared to let him read. He's read a couple, and there's only a few of my books that I felt he could read. I can't let him into my brain that deeply otherwise. We'll see. Someday when we run out of things to talk about, then I'll just give him one of my books.
For you, what's the best part about being an author?
I do get paid to wear pajama pants all day long, although I go into an actual office, and so they're always surprised to see that I've paid money to rent an office and still wear pajama pants. But quite seriously, it's the other authors. It's the writing community. I don't know if it's Stockholm Syndrome or what, but I sure do love publishing, even though it's wacky and weird and emerging and changing constantly. And I can't feel like I can get my arms around it. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all feel this way. Like, what's tomorrow? What's going to be in a month? What's going to be in a year? Who knows? But I sure do love those other authors and editors and people who love books, librarians and booksellers.
All right. Well, we are to our fun extra questions segment, our favorite. What is one food that will never get past your lips?
I eat everything. I can't think of a single thing. I had a big bowl of crickets the other day, and I thought I wouldn't eat this for fun, but yes, I would eat it.
Okay. First time anyone's ever answered it that way, Kelly, just so you know.
And I think somebody actually said crickets was the one thing that would never get past their lips. So
done. It was fine. It was crunchy.
Who would play you in a movie?
There's Kate Winslet's character in Sense and Sensibility. And so ever since then, I've always felt like she is my spirit actor. But then I saw Mare of Easttown, and she's amazing in it. She's fabulous, but I don't relate personally.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Invisibility. I just want to spy on people. I don't do it. I'm consciously careful of it. But wouldn't it be great if you could do it all day long?
What's your biggest guilty pleasure?
I don't really ascribe to the guilty pleasure concept. I don't think food is dangerous. I don't think reading the wrong books should make you feel guilty. If there's a guilty pleasure, it is watching old movies that are kind of inappropriate with my kiddo and experiencing them through his eyes for the first time. And thinking the whole time, this is cringy, or we have to talk about how this is being portrayed, or did we not have consent in the 80s? But either way, right. Oh yeah, this is really interesting to see.
And the scenes that you forgot completely were in movies now it's playing in front of your kid, and it's too late.
Oh, for sure.
You can't go back.
Nope. We watched Temple of Doom. There's a perfect example where I was like, what am I doing? This can't be good parenting. But we didn't turn it off, so there we are.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
I used to work in a food testing lab where they deliberately infected foods with salmonella and E. coli to see how fast it would spread. And my job was to clean them afterwards. And it was raw meat.
Yikes.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go.
That's it.
I worked in
a good one.
An autoclave room where they heated everything up to sterilize it in these huge ovens. And that room didn't have air conditioning or windows or a fan. It was just me in the back of an alley in this little room, putting rotten raw meat down the drain and then sterilizing it in these ovens.
Doesn't seem legal, does it? Those kinds of conditions?
It was not it wasn't that bad. I mean, my friends were out detasseling. I was probably making triple what they did, but still, I don't recommend it as a lifestyle choice.
Did you say your friends were doing detasseling?
Yes.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah.
I picked up on that.
Yeah. For all the
I have a friend who grew up in
that right
Nebraska.
now.
Yeah.
Yes. out in the country, you can start detasseling when you're younger than it's legal for you to work at other places. So detasseling is typically people's first job. And they get you up at 4 a.m. and you get on a school bus and you go, because it gets so blazingly hot, and you have to wear long sleeved everything because you get ripped to shreds otherwise. And you just go through these super tall cornfields and reach up high and try to detassel one at a time all day long. It's like a character building experience that I missed out on because I was busy working in the autoclave.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Well, I really want to write multi-generational stories someday. And so I think if you look at the way that our generations will stack out, and the fact that I've read maybe 1,000 books set during World War II, I would really be interested in getting my brain wrapped around the late 20s and early 30s, the time between the wars. Because if you look at how the grandmothers of my main characters will fall, that's where they're going to pop out. So I will be reading and doing a lot of research on that so that one day, 10 years from now or whenever time is right, I can get that story told.
What is your favorite scent?
I love the smell of jasmine, and it always makes me think about being on vacation. It doesn't grow up here.
What's the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
I've done a lot of weird things, the bungee jumping and the skydiving, and I thought scuba diving was kind of on the scary side. But generally, anytime that I have to go into a situation with crocodiles, that's the...
What's one thing you're really bad at?
So many choices. I am really, really bad at sports. I am laughably bad at sports. And I have many other fine talents, but I was born getting hit in the face with some sort of projectile or something. Like my parents tried everything, tennis, soccer, golf, everything we could think of. And my brother is amazing at everything he tries. And I can just barely bike in a straight line. I am woeful.
But how is your brother at writing novels?
He probably would be great at that too if he wasn't so busy
one of those
doing
people.
other things. Yeah, he's a jack of all trades.
If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Yes. There's some things I didn't pay attention to when they were happening to me. And there are some things that I want to do. Like, I wouldn't call them regrets. I just would like a do-over because of how I felt about them.
Well,
All
that's
right.
like the perfect way to wrap up the interview.
Yes, it is. This was so much fun. Thank you for being on here with us.
Oh, you
Thanks,
guys,
Kelly.
you make it so easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comment section. This has been Behind the Book.